So firstly, however you're listening to this, whether you're watching online or whether you're listening to the podcast, I will start with the podcasters to set the scene. We are backstage at the Birmingham Institute.
Couldn't have handpicked a better venue. Look at this lovely room we've ended up in.
Pretty atmospheric, isn't it?
And our guest this week is Passenger, aka Mr. Mike Rosenberg, or the other way around. We're probably about 2 hours before your gig now. We're about 2 hours out before you. No, because the support act's going to go on first.
That's right. 3 or 4 hours before I'm.
Oh, you got
stage.
ages, haven't you?
I know.
What do you do normally in that time? You've already sound checked, right?
Yeah, just usually sort of pace around, getting more and more anxious about the show. You know.
Really?
Yeah. You know what? This tour, I've been going to the gym and swimming in the daytime just to try and kind of keep myself
have a routine.
Sane. Yeah, really helps actually.
There seems to be a bit of a trend with people that when you speak to them down the tours, they go, "Oh, it's not like my first tour," right? Like it's not like my first tour. I mean, that was chaos. And then the second tour is like, well, we still drink, but generally we just, we have a few. And then by the third tour, it's like
yoga and
well, I'll have a smoothie after the gig, and
early night.
How much of that is just the repetition and the grind of the tour, or how much of that is your personal life has just changed as you've got further down the line with it? I know you are slightly different to most artists, because what happens is they do the first album, the difficult second, and then they start to have bigger gaps.
I had the difficult 7 albums, and then
You've done an album every single
every year for the last 4 or 5 at least, and then beyond that.
Yeah, it's 9 albums in 10 years, I think, or something silly like that. I mean, as far as the touring goes, I think it's a bit of it's a few things. When you start touring, you're young and you don't get hangovers like you do when you're in your 30s. So that's a massive factor. But yeah, I think once you've done it so much, you just want to you take it seriously. You want people who have bought tickets 3, 4, 5 months in advance to your show. The last thing I want to do is turn up with a hangover and give a subpar performance, I kind of think you don't deserve a fan base if you treat them like that, So,
but does that then mean that when you were younger, then you think there was the odd gig where you think, do you know what, I was a bit ropey there, that was not as good as I
think with me, because I was busking and playing in pubs, I think when I look back to those days where I really was hitting it quite hard and whatever, I was sort of in my mid-20s, and the people who were coming down to the gigs were sort of paying a $5 on the door, if that. I mean, my guest list was usually quite extensive, so most people were getting in for free anyway. So to be honest, if I had a bit of a sore head, I didn't feel too bad about it.
Yeah. Let's just talk about the busking for a second, because that is really unique to you. I'm sure a lot of people have followed suit now, but what you did, and for those of you that don't know Mike and don't know Mike's story, you essentially landed in Australia. You didn't have a major following at that time, and your intention was to go out there to busk. You didn't go out there to go, I'm going to go and make it big in Australia. No one goes to Australia to make it big. So you went out there to busk. Just talk us through that. Like, so you get off the plane in Sydney? Right? And have you got friends?
Very few, and that's still the case today. I mean, that's just a general point. I've got very few friends. But,
and a job? Money in the account?
I guess it goes back a little bit further than that, because I started busking when basically my young life kind of fell apart a little bit when I was about sort of 22 or 3. The band Passenger split up. My manager at the time left. I had a break up with a girlfriend.
There were 5 of you in the band?
There was 5 of us, yeah. And I ended up moving back in with my parents. And so
is it out of stubbornness that you kept the name even though there's just one of you then?
Yeah.
But it's all right, I'm still going to call it Passenger even though it's just me.
Yeah.
Like, is that, you just stuck with it? Is that, what was the thinking there? Is that a conscious decision?
I think at the time I wasn't sure of what I was going to do, whether, I was going to form another band or whatever. So I just kind of kept Passenger for the meantime, not to confuse people,
Yeah, of course.
But basically I started busking when I didn't know what else I could do. It was either sort of give up music or really start getting creative with how I went about things. So I kind of felt like the only thing in my power was to go and do something like busking, where I didn't need a record label or an agent or £1,000,000 behind me. You know, actually, there's this really sort of liberating feeling actually when I first went out busking, and it was just in my hometown in Brighton, and I went out and I played for 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday and then 3 or 4 hours on a Sunday, and it was amazing. And people, for the first time in my career, stopped and listened and bought a CD, and I could see the reaction. It was very tangible, and it was this wonderful feeling of like, hang on a minute, there's nothing to say I can't do this anywhere. Why, if it works in Brighton, why wouldn't it work everywhere? So I spent that summer just travelling around the UK on my own. It was all very sort of off the cuff. I would try and get pub gigs on the day. I would wake up in the morning, I'd look at the map and I'd figure out where to go. And
wow,
it was a fantastic summer. It was such a liberating feeling after being so sort of tied down to a band and a certain way of doing things, just to be like, actually none of that is necessary. They're kind of walls and rules that have been built up around me. I can just take my guitar and my amp and my CDs and go anywhere.
Did you already have, like, were you changing, did that mean you were changing your set lists all the time? Were you writing as much while you were on the road, or did it inspire you on that side of things, or what? How did that all work?
Definitely, but busking, I can't begin to explain how busking helped me in so many ways. In definitely, I got much better at performing and playing. You're playing for 3 or 4 hours a day.
But it's like the Malcolm Gladwell thing of like, it takes 10,000 hours. Right?
It is true.
And that, I don't know if you've read that book, but he went into a lot of detail about the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, the reason the Beatles were so successful is because they were out in Germany and they had this contract with a bar, and every single night for 5 hours they just hit it and hit it and hit it. They did empty bars, they did full bars, they did drunk bars, they did angry bars.
But it's weird because you don't see all those hours, do you? When you just see them, on top of the pops or whatever, back in the day, all this sorts of thing, you just see that one gig.
So then you decide, right, I'm going to go and do this in Australia. Why Australia?
Well, I got to the end of that summer and was loving busking, wanted to carry on, and it was getting cold in England. So I just kind of thought, where can I go that's going to be A, warm, B, is going to sort of appreciate this kind of music. And Australia just seemed to kind of volunteer itself, really. I'd never really... Oh, no, I had been there once before, and just done a couple of gigs, and it seemed to have gone down quite well, and people seemed to dig what I was doing. So
you sat on that plane. It's a long flight. You're going via Dubai or somewhere ridiculous on the way there. You're sat right in the back of cattle class. Your knees are tucked up to your shoulders.
Absolutely.
You're sat on your own. It's night time. Everyone else is sort of dozing off. Are you sat there going, oh, fuck. Like, what am I doing? What's going to be on the other side? Like, what did you genuinely think? I'm going to go and busk for the summer. Do you think for the Australian summer? Or did you think, I reckon there's something special about this? I think, a lot of people say they visualize success. I knew at the end of this was going to be something. Did you have an idea at that point?
I think there have been points looking back where I could feel something coming success-wise. It certainly wasn't then. It certainly wasn't on the plane to Australia. It was a long time ago, and I can't really remember what was running through my silly little brain at the time. But I think all I wanted to do was carry on with this new sort of sense of belief in what I was doing. You know what I mean? Like, busking gave me this real... positive energy, sort of this injection of positivity that had been lacking up until that point, where, as I said before, it was just this kind of understanding that if I could find the right place to play, on the right day, in the right town, the right spot, then people will stop and listen and they'll buy a CD. And I don't know, it was... With Australia, I remember I didn't have a return ticket, and I kind of left it. I was just like, well, if it's great, then I'll stay, and if it's not, then I'll come back. And I ended up staying for 6 months that trip, and making a record and doing various other things.
That CD you had with you at the time, what singles did that have on it?
It didn't have any singles. I mean, it was an album called Wide Eyes Blind Love, which was something I made with a mate. It took us 5 days in his home studio. I paid him 500 quid, and it was just very sort of rough, live versions of songs. But that record, I'm so grateful to that record because I sold thousands of copies of that on my busking trip.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting. I was here, I was listening to an interview with Ed Sheeran the other day, and he was talking. It's not dissimilar actually that he paid for his trip to America originally because he raised £2,000 from selling his CD at gigs.
Yeah.
And that feels like a really pure way to do it. But that one didn't have any of the break, because the breakthrough single came, well, I'm assuming and that was recorded in Australia, was it?
That was way later, yeah. I mean, Let It Go was on an album called All the Little Lights, which I recorded in 2011, I think.
And where did you record that?
In Sydney, yeah. But that was on my second or third big trip to Australia, so that's jumping ahead a little bit. I made several albums in between, and yeah, the busking, I funded everything through busking basically. So all the money I was making from busking would go into making my records and just going back into, the business. And that's kind of how I started to see it. And that's true for any business as well, any small business. You talk to anyone who's doing something, and every penny that you make for the first 2 or 3 years goes straight back in. And this was no different. I think that was a massive changing point actually when I started viewing it as a small business. Like it was Passenger became this thing that I was nurturing, and it was getting bigger ever so slightly year on year. It was kind of getting slightly bigger and bigger, and I remember making my third or fourth records in Australia before the success happened, and I remember going out of the studio and busking at lunchtime to literally make the money to come and pay for the studio time and the musicians.
It's like
quite genuinely,
literally hand to mouth.
Yeah. And I mean that's a true story, and it's something I'm proud of. And I think this is the work ethic that people need to. I didn't understand how hard I needed to work for years, and I kind of thought it was just going to fall in my lap because I was talented. And it's like that doesn't happen. I mean, maybe for a few people, but anybody who truly makes it in any kind of genuine way, if you scratch the surface, if you go into their backstory, they've worked really fucking hard for it at some point.
There's nothing like living off Australian biltong for 3 months.
Yeah, absolutely. You know about that one, yeah.
Where did you live? Where did you stay? So when you got out of the airport, day one, getting a taxi to where? What was the plan?
My friends were exceptionally understanding, and I stayed on their sofa for about 4 months.
Wow.
It's this lovely beach house in Bronte, which is eastern suburbs.
Did they know it was going to be 4 months?
Well, I don't think
just a couple of days, just till Sunday, and then
just till I get back on my feet.
I just like the idea of you going out for a gig and going, he doesn't have a return ticket, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were really sweet about it, and I
Have there been things along, just to sort of detour slightly, have there been moments along the way where you've been able to show gratitude to those people?
Definitely.
Because that must be the nicest thing now.
Of course it is.
Like, what does it feel like when you go back and you play a massive gig in Sydney and you say to those two guys that put you up,
yeah, have you bought tickets?
Come to my
because you're not
dressing
getting
room.
on the door.
Don't touch, don't touch my champagne.
Yeah, that's my whiskey.
That is my whiskey.
Yeah.
No, fuck off. No,
Yeah.
but
what's your name again? I don't know.
Terry, Tim, Fiona.
Sofa. Yeah. No, they were so gracious, and yeah, I mean, you definitely try and sort of pay these people back one way or another.
It must be hard to keep track of them all.
Yeah, it is, and it is a bit of a whirlwind. And when there's so much that's happened in the last 10 years. When I try and sort of look back and remember it all, it is a little bit of a blur at times,
Were there any poignant moments or low moments or things that stood out from that trip where you go, oh God, you remember that night when?
I don't know about that trip. I remember it being a really positive experience, that first trip to Australia. There were definitely times when I was busking that were really low. Towards the end of, because I was busking for about 5 years, I think. And towards the end of it, I was getting a bit fed up with it. to talk about it now, it all sounds very romantic and sort of.
Are you saying you would go back and it's like one of those things you couldn't do again? You did it once.
I would never be able to do it again. Like I haven't got, the energy that it took to go from
out of you.
Because remember as well, like I'd already put 2 or 3 years into Passenger in the band form. We'd made a record, we'd toured, so I was already a little bit sort of, knackered out by that entire experience. Busking for 5 years, like really starting from scratch and building it into this thing. It's exhausting, man. Like I don't think I could do it again.
Was there ever a moment where somebody put some cash in your hat before you'd even set up, and you'd gone, hold on, are they giving me money because they think I'm
feel sorry for me?
Yeah, they think like there are those moments where, because there is a fine line between people's interpretation. I don't know if Australia is different, but people's interpretations of
it's definitely true. Yeah,
buskers and homeless people. Right?
But this is interesting, isn't it? Because I think I talk to so many musicians about busking and try and sort of explain how important it was to me and how brilliant it was, And I have to say, a lot of people kind of have this air of being above it,
Really?
that it's something that they would never sort of stoop to, which I find kind of an amazing attitude. But it kind of goes along with what you're saying, this kind of perception of buskers being homeless or it's like, actually no, it's, I always say, like, those gigs that I was doing around that time were in busy bars full of drunk people that couldn't give 2 shits about what I was doing, and they were soul destroying. Busking, if you're clever about it, you go out on a sunny Saturday, you find a really lovely spot, and you gather 50 people who really care. That's a great gig. For somebody in that position, what would you prefer? That bar or that busk?
It's funny you describe that, because the first time I ever saw you was on YouTube, a YouTube video that went viral of a kid coming up. I remember it still now. Do you remember the video?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
The kid coming, and he knew
Melbourne.
all the words already or something. So
that guy's going to be a superstar, no doubt.
So had you met him several times before he'd come to see you busk regularly, or did he just start singing and you noticed, oh my God, there's a kid there who knows all the words to my song?
I think that was the first time I met him, but ever since then he comes to gigs and we hang out and catch up and stuff. So yeah, he's an amazing, talented little dude. I mean, probably not so little anymore. He's in his teens now, but.
So let's go to the recording of, we'll call it that album, where you were in the studio. We obviously know what happened to Let. I just loaded up Spotify then.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Let Her Go. What's that? 800?
801 million.
801 million.
Bit disappointing, really, wasn't it? Yeah, gutted.
Right, so
is 1,000 million a billion? When do you
Yeah.
get to, so 200 million off a billion streams. So 1 in 7 people on the planet will have heard the song.
Well, my mum 700 million times. Yeah.
Take us to the like the conception of that track. Like, where was it born? And I don't mean where did you record it in the studio, but literally where were you, and where did that come from?
I was in Newcastle, which is 2 hours north of Sydney, not our Newcastle.
Oh, I was about to say, what a shit story.
Anyway, next one.
And I was supporting a friend's band, and I was sitting in the dressing room, and it's funny you should mention those kind of down moments, those low moments. And I remember my friend's band were doing really well at the time, and they were all over Triple J, which is
massive, Australia's
Radio 1. And I was kind of like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I'm working so hard, I'm creating all this music, and we had this big chat about it. And I remember feeling pretty kind of down about it all. And I ended up writing Let Her Go in 45 minutes in the dressing room. Yeah, it took 45 minutes.
To the same version we know it as now,
pretty
roughly.
Much. Yeah, I mean, like, give or take a few words, but yeah.
Just break that down for me, because I can't begin to see or
Ollie
think.
Can't do anything well in 45 minutes. So
I can't now. Like, gone are the days.
You need to talk me, like, so you're in the dressing room, and what you play a riff or a chord, or what feels good in that moment? Is it a line?
Lyrics first?
That tune, that came out first.
And it just came out.
Yeah, it was. But I think that's one of the reasons why Let It Go did what it did. It's because it's not overthought, it's not overanalyzed. It came out so naturally.
Okay, so you sat there, the melody comes out. Then literally what? Then what? What do you just go?
Start humming?
Yeah.
It's not like...
Yeah, definitely. It's always melody that comes first, and then you kind of... It's very difficult to explain, but yeah, quite often you get a sense of, if not what the song should be about, the kind of the feel of the song. You get a sense of the atmosphere of the song, and I think then it kind of sets up a lyrical plate for you, if that makes sense.
There's an emphasis of like loss in there, how did that correlate to where you were like personally at that moment? Had you literally, what had happened?
Yeah, I mean, the song is about an ex-girlfriend, and we'd sort of been...
Can we name her the $1 billion bitch?
Definitely not. Definitely.
No, but how funny is that now? Because she must know.
She's definitely going around going 800 million.
Yeah, that's about. No, but what a weird,
that is bizarre,
phenomenon. Like, she was a part of that creation, and that must have been a separate journey for her altogether. Because imagine every single bar and elevator and radio station, and
we've talked about it. We're really good friends still. And,
that's nice.
She's been amazing about it. She was so gracious about it, and
okay, so the song starts to come together. How long between writing that song backstage at the gig and getting into the studio?
Probably about 6 months.
Wow, so you're sitting on it a while. Is that frustrating? Because do you think, I think I've got one here?
I didn't, because this is the thing. Like, everyone kind of thinks, oh well, it was, you must have written it and thought, great, dollar signs. I'd written songs before that and I've written many since where I've thought, flipping heck, this is really special, and it's not really gone on to do anything. So by that stage, I'd been busking for so long. I'd been so rejected by the industry as far as like radio play and all that kind of stuff goes. I was like, it doesn't matter what I do.
Hardened to the feeling of it not necessarily working out.
But not, and I wasn't in it. I mentioned that we're, talking about radio play on that very day and how I wasn't getting any, and I was feeling kind of low about it. So to then go on and write Let It Go on that day was quite weird. And so the furthest thing from my mind was, great, this is a hit single. In fact, I was thinking, probably, if anything, I was like, who cares how good it is?
Really?
Because, man, radio is a total stitch up. Like, it is. It like... You're either in the gang or you're not. You're in the clique or you're not. And I've never been in the gang anywhere. Yeah. So I've always had to operate on the outskirts. Like go busking, do things in a different way. Because I've never kind of sat in the radio box. And then what was weird is then I had this huge song and radio kind of had to play it.
You had to play it,
I have to say as well, it's about being an independent artist. I think if you look around at how much opportunity you get as an independent artist, it's a little bit bleak compared to those who are backed by majors, I have to say.
Really?
Yeah, for sure, of course.
Is there any consolation that at least, compared to even 10 years ago, let alone 20, there are so many other platforms with which you can smash it?
Absolutely. And that's the wonder of it now. Like, you don't need to go down that route. You can make an album in your bedroom, you can release it yourself, and if it's good, then it will go somewhere, it will do something.
Yeah.
So back to that studio then. You record Let It Go. Is there a moment when, I have that vision of like a guy behind a glass screen going, "That's a wrap, Mike," and they're all going, thumbs up, thumbs up.
Yeah.
Like, there's a moment, and everyone looks at each other in the eye and goes,
little fireworks going off.
Do you know what I mean? And
Not at all.
Your love interest sort of puts a hair behind her ear in the corner and goes, "He's going to be minted."
Brilliant. I love that. None of that happened. But mate, it's funny with Let It Go that every radio interview I ever do, I get told off by the presenter because of the end of that song. There's that kind of massive gap.
Mm-hmm.
Only know you love her when you let her go. and you let her go, right? And because I didn't know what the rules were around radio because I'd never had a song on the radio. So
have a hard. The rules are you need a hard. It's really interesting actually. If you listen,
you can't have any silence.
No,
right?
no. There's a way around that. There is a way around that. You can talk in the gap between.
Yeah.
Do exactly what you did again, and we'll show you what what you have to do. So
Only know you love her when you let her go.
That's Passenger there with Let Her Go, track of the week this week.
And you let her go.
Join us next for that's what that's how you work around the gap.
Yeah, well, there are many presenters worldwide that are furious with me anyway for putting them in that position. But,
so funny.
Okay, so no magic moment happens in the studio. So because I know there is a magic moment. I know there is, because you cannot have something that is that big a movement that at one point you didn't suddenly go, and I don't know whether it was when you were driving along and it came on the radio, or there was a phone call, but there would have been a moment where you suddenly went, oh God.
Yeah. The weird thing with that song was kind of how it got started, because it came out on that record and it was out in the world for 9 months. This is what I mean about when people say, like, you must have known it was a hit. No one fucking knew it was a hit. For 9 months, no one was kind of tearing my arm off for it. It was out in the world, you know.
Yeah.
And we got this email from this guy called Dave in the Netherlands. And it's a funny email. He's like, look, I'm a radio plugger. I've heard your song. I was having lunch in a cafe and I heard your song. I Shazammed it. I found out who it was. And he's like, I really like it. I think it could be a hit here in Holland. Would you let me take it to radio for you? And it's one of those emails where you read and you're like, fine.
Yeah, I've literally got nothing to lose here. Sure.
Why not?
Yeah. Sure, Dave.
And within 2 weeks, it was the most played song in the Netherlands. 3 weeks, it was number one. And then it dominoed around the world. But it was... The thing that I'm perplexed by is that if Dave hadn't had lunch in that cafe that day and he hadn't heard that song...
different.
Just saying, like, who knows?
Yeah,
maybe it would have happened somewhere else at some other time. But, people do the same thing with sport, I think. It's such a fine line between absolute success and total obscurity. And people like to think it's different. It's otherwise, it's like...
You're born to do it.
Gascoigne stretching for that ball in '96. Like if he puts that in, then England win the tournament.
Yeah.
And the whole world of football is different.
And he was no better or worse footballer for that moment. It was just a moment.
Right, exactly. And similarly with music, you get these... You can do everything right. You can work as hard as you want. You can be super talented. You can do all of these things. You need a Dave from Holland moment to actually make it ignite,
So how do you deal with that then? Because do you either beat yourself up and go, I'm nothing special, I got lucky, or do you say, well, I earned that luck because I busked for thousands of hours in Australia? Does it bother you to think that way, if that makes sense?
I think you will your own luck. You put yourself in a position where you can have a moment like that. Like if I hadn't have done all the busking, if I hadn't have done all that stuff, I wouldn't have written Let Her Go. I wouldn't have got to that point. It wouldn't have been playing in that cafe. So it's... Everything leads to everything else. I don't think for 1 minute you can kind of start looking back at things and regretting things or wishing you'd done things differently. I'm so glad it all happened how it did.
Mm-hmm.
It was a mess, but it was a glorious mess, and it was
chaos.
It was a mess that I'm proud of.
So you go on this crazy journey literally around the world, and you can hear that in your song. And so in some ways, like, we came on that journey with you of heartbreak and success and travel and loss and having kind of a unique perspective on the world because you were traveling through it and you were observing people. You get to the sort of Mike now in 2018 and you've been on that crazy journey, but at some point you have to find Mike's life. Like, you have to find, like, your world and how you're going to live in it and what means and how do you settle in some form. What is that now? Is there a home? How does that work and how do you function after? Because sometimes it must wake up and be like, what the fuck happened?
Yeah, most days. It's really odd because, as I say, like, it's really difficult to actually go back and remember everything, and it's bizarre. And so many gigs, so many people, so many flights, so many different places, and it really is. It just kind of blurs into this massive, glorious, disastrous pit of amazingness. And
but is there a hangover?
I think you become a bit sort of. I've had to work at coming down from it a little bit, because, I've got a lovely girlfriend, I've got 2 cats, I've got a house, and it's something that's quite new to me, and having that is such a wonderful feeling. It's kind of given me an anchor and rooted me in a way that's I don't think I've ever had before. But it is quite a lot to get used to after being completely sort of
living on the road.
No fixed address, just kind of floating about for the best part of a decade. It is quite difficult to come in and try and like live a bit more of a normal life.
Yeah, I kind of don't know how I would adjust to my girlfriend Beth yelling from the kitchen saying, I thought you said you were going to put the wash on. And I go, fuck off. Because I'll be thinking, hold on, I've had people do my washing for the last 10 years. Because people have been screaming my name. Every single venue I turn up in, everything that I want is provided for. How do you get into that?
But I mentioned before...
Are you asking him, how do I tell Beth to do my washing for me?
Yeah, look, I can't help with
Passenger, that. Can you ask Beth to do the washing?
I think Beth's got a good point. I think you should do, if anything, you should do more washing for Beth. I think, as I mentioned before, busking really taught me a lot, not just musically, but it really taught me how to be humble as well. Like every day with busking, there is some sort of situation that occurs. There's another busker who wants you to move. There's a homeless guy who gets annoyed with you. There's a shopkeeper who comes out and yells at you. There's a police. There's security. There's something. It's raining. Something's happening, and you have to navigate it. You have to figure out a way of like getting around it. And over the years, I think it really taught me how to, be a better person actually, and kind of I don't know, view it as a bit of a daily lesson. And it's hard to explain, but busking really did become a bit of a way of life. Plus, I was staying in shared dorm hostels for £8 a night. I was getting the train places. I was doing it on a shoestring, and I don't think you ever forget that. I did it for years, and it's not like I went on X Factor and suddenly had a sort of smash hit single and don't know anything else. I do know the other side. I've been there actually for a long time. So when it comes to putting my washing on, I'm fucking fine to do that. Like I remember that, and I'm just happy it's not a washing machine in some weird hostel where I have to go and ask for soap at reception.
It's like the whole starting a small business and growing it to its fortunes over years and years, rather than just winning the lottery like the X Factor is that music equivalent.
Exactly, yeah. And you and it doesn't happen overnight. So you acclimatise to it, and it's a slow process. It's like, it's funny when people watch me perform and I'm playing on my own in front of big audience or whatever. The reaction is always the same. It's like, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you get up on stage and do that. I don't know how you have the confidence and the balls or whatever to do it. I didn't go from nothing to playing to 3,000 people.
They haven't seen the busking hours. They haven't.
Well, you're talking about the Beatles. I've played many empty bars. I've played whatever, and you acclimatise slowly to it becoming slightly bigger and slightly bigger. Every step that you take is scary. Every time you go from a 200 cap to a 500 cap to 1,000 to 3,000 to a 5,000, each one of those is scary. But it's not like you're going from I've never played in front of anyone before to Wembley Stadium,
Mm-hmm. And for your, do you live back in Brighton now?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so that's an unusual thing, isn't it? Because you left, but you had your core group of friends, and I get the impression that you probably have you probably still carry the same company you did when you were back in Brighton.
Yeah.
How does that work, where you now obviously have this crazy career, and you have money gives you opportunity, right? You can go where you want and do what you want to do to an extent. Is that a delicate thing where you've got to be careful? Because I'm thinking now, my friends, we do things at a similar rate, and we all So how do you navigate that? Because if you said to your friends, "Oh, why don't we just all go to Ibiza this weekend?" They're probably thinking, "Well, and how does that work?"
That's a really interesting question. I think I come from very humble beginnings. We didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up. We're fine, but just not well off at all.
Because your dad was American,
and
your mum was English,
and so had a very sort of normal childhood, busking for years. Didn't have any money until very recently, and again, it's something you have to kind of adapt and get used to. I think you just have to be sensitive about it. I remember the first summer that I went busking, and I made some money, and I just left this kind of like pile of like skanky fivers and tenors, like for my mum and dad, like on the kitchen table. There was some crap little card being like, "Thanks, love you," and it was just like the silliest thing to do, and not the way to go about it, And I think hopefully I've learned how to be generous and how to give people things, but in a nice way, in a way that doesn't kind of belittle anyone or make people feel shit,
And so now that you're back, you've got, like you've said a moment ago, an anchor back in Brighton, core group of friends, girlfriend, 2 cats. Does coming away on tour still exciting in the same way, or does a little part of you on night 20 go, I really miss it, I really want to go back?
Of course, I've got stuff to miss now, which is
that's tough.
Something that I didn't necessarily have for years. So it's getting harder and harder to leave, definitely. But
really?
I would say though as well that I'm so lucky to have the crew and the people around me, because I genuinely love all the people that I work with.
I got the sense when we came in, all of the people that we met,
I
very early on went, I think these guys have probably been with Mike since the beginning. Like they've been with you for a long time. They just seemed
familiar,
all so relaxed. They're in like flip-flop shorts. You were sound checking.
Yeah, exactly. And it does make it a hell of a lot easier. And of course you have moments where you're like, you don't have a great show, or you're knackered, or you're feeling sick or whatever. And the last thing you want to do is be miles away from home, and you just want to go back and have a cuddle and watch Netflix. That's what you want to do. But I think there's
what are you watching right now?
You know what? I haven't. I've had to go back to the beginning of Game of Thrones with my girlfriend.
Really?
'Cause she hasn't watched it, so I was
you're rewatching it with her.
Yeah, and
so you're half watching the TV, half watching her face at the poignant moments to see her reaction.
Red wedding. Yeah. Nothing happens here. This is just a normal wedding. Everyone has a lovely time.
I'm going to the loo. I wouldn't at this bit. Just stay tight.
Crossbow. It's fun. Yeah, it's funny. So actually, this is like my 3rd time watching. I'm pretty obsessed with Game of Thrones.
Really? They've pushed back the date of the next series as well.
Yeah,
it's frustrating.
Devastating.
I'll tell you what I just finished was Godless. Have you seen that on?
No, I've heard about it.
I think you'd really like that.
All right.
It's a proper. Basically, the really short premise is cowboys and Indians.
Okay.
Most people, I think, at that point switch off and go, "No, that sounds a bit naff." Town, Midwest America. All of the working men work down the silver mine. There's a massive accident, and basically all of the able-bodied men die.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
So all that's left over is like young boys and elderly men, and they basically have to protect the mine and save the town. It's just women left over, and it's their story of housing a fugitive, and it's like the most amazing love story.
Really?
Like, it's one of the only things. I was sat with
premise for a
I was sat with Beth the other day on the sofa. We watched it.
Had you done the washing?
Do you know what? I am.
Washing was on.
I'm pretty
you
good.
You could relax.
Washing was on. Everyone was happy. We're watching Godless. The credits finished, and then I started crying.
Wow.
I've never had that before. But it was what was so clever about it.
It just dawned on you that you had to do the dishes.
And I realised I had to do the washing. They didn't follow the traditional narrative. So Godless, that is a brilliant one to watch.
Sweet.
Passenger's brand new album is Runaway. It's on the wall next to us now. It's out now. You can literally go and, let's be honest, stream it.
Yeah.
Actually, that's the weirdest thing. We left to come here. We got in the car. I plugged my phone into Apple CarPlay, loaded Spotify up, and before it could do anything, it went, recommend Passenger on the way to here. How bizarre is that? And we listened to something else. So.
Yeah, of course you did. Yeah. Techno beats. Let's do this. Yeah.
People who are listening right now, if they're going to go and listen to the album for the first time, what is your favourite track from that album?
My favourite song is "To Be Free," which is track 9, and because it's a really personal song, It's about my grandparents who are Jewish refugees. They were in a refugee camp for the duration of the Second World War in Switzerland. Yeah,
that is madness.
Went to America after that, and that's where my dad grew up. And it's a long story, and the song.
I feel we should have got into this way earlier.
Next time.
What a tease that is! Yeah, amazing.
It's a tragic story, and you know, obviously something that's been around me since I was conscious, since I was a baby, and never thought I would write a song about it because it's you know, very close to the bone. Rather like your story about crying after the credits were finished. When I wrote it, I was on holiday a few months ago, and I was just playing guitar, and started just kind of these words were just kind of coming out of me, and then I soon realised what story I was telling, and just started crying. But it wasn't like, you know, when you cry and you're like, oh God, I'm crying, this is weird. It was so subconscious. It was so coming from such a deep place, such a sort of dormant upset. It was a really peculiar experience, and I just sort of cried for 20 minutes whilst I was playing this song. It was a very bizarre experience.
Imagine walking in on you at that moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, girlfriend's like, I'm not doing this anymore. This is a step too far.
But I'm also thinking as well of your dad hearing that.
Yeah.
How do you navigate? Because you don't want it to pop up on Spotify, and he goes, "Oh, lads!" Like, he's on the way to a golf trip. And he goes, "Lads, new album, brilliant."
Yeah.
Oh, for God, Mike.
Yeah. Mate, I told him that I'd written the song, but
because it feels like you have to break it to it.
Yeah, and especially like I love my dad to bits. He's quite an emotional character. You know, not surprisingly considering the childhood he had and everything else. But he and I did mean to kind of sit down with him and the song and be like, look, this, and it didn't happen. And in the end, he watched it on some sort of Facebook Live thing that we did in the States. So I wasn't there for when it.
He knew it was coming.
He knew the song existed, but he hadn't heard it, and so I just kind of got this text message after I played in the States. So.
And what did he say?
I think, yeah.
Did you open the text and just see like 20 lines?
Exactly.
And go, I know what this is about.
Yeah. It was really sweet. He took it super well, and I think hopefully I've written it in a way that is kind of delicate around the story, and I got some of the facts wrong. So we had lunch the other day, and he was like, "Yeah, wasn't in France, was in Switzerland," and that it was quite helpful.
And you're like, "Yeah, but Dad, it's just the
yeah. Come on, man, give me a break."
That's our life with our podcast and our show, like telling stories. And my mum, well, technically, it was a Thursday, not a Wednesday. It doesn't really matter, does it?
Sure. Mike, you're a busy man. We're gonna let you get on. You've got another sold out gig tonight. I think just as someone that has listened to you since that YouTube clip and then followed the albums through, it is, I know it sounds silly, but it's almost so rewarding to meet you now, because I feel in a way that I kind of know some of your journey, and it sounds really odd, but there's like, we were saying on the way over here, it's just like there is a sense of like, God, he's done well.
Oh, cool.
Like,
Thank
wow.
you.
Like, look at where he's come from. And it almost feels like as you tell that story and you break it down to those details, it's like that. It's almost a movie script, isn't it? You know?
It is when you work backwards. It wasn't when I was doing it, you know? And that's what I mean. Like, it's very romantic to talk about it. And I pick these moments that, you know, the Dave moment in Holland and all of these
rose-tinted
highlights.
glasses,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
But even for me, that's the narrative that I've now kind of got in my head as to how it happened. What you were saying about, I think a lot of Passenger fans feel proud and feel a connection on that level, because Passenger isn't, other than Let Her Go, it isn't rammed down your throat on mainstream radio or across the mainstream media. You kind of have to stumble across it. Even with that massive song, you kind of, most people have stumbled across it either from YouTube or busking or me supporting Ed Sheeran or something, and everyone's got their story. Everyone tells me their story of how they stumbled across it, and I love that, because they're like, I went to see Ed play 5 years ago in Melbourne and you supported, and ever since then I've bought every record and blah 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 blah. And there's this sense of like, I discovered this, I found this, and it's real, and it's and there is this kind of like, underdog. I want this to work. I want this to happen.
Oh, and the
you know?
British
And the
public
British.
will love
Yeah,
that.
loving it. Not just the British. I think the world over.
Yeah.
Which is actually very interesting as well. I mean, I know we're sort of wrapping up, but that's an interesting transition when you go from busker, playing in a pub, everybody wants you to do well,
Yeah.
to then having a hit single and everyone's like, oh, he's changed.
Go on then, impress me.
Dickhead. Yeah, exactly.
And in some ways, that is the curse of Let It Go. That is the curse, because it's that is always going to stand above
Yeah.
the other tracks. And in some ways, it's great because that track
Yeah.
did a lot for you.
Yeah.
But that comes at a price, and that price is it's overplayed on radio to an extent for some people.
Yeah.
And so when they come to your gigs and everyone knows that track, you do have a bit of work to do there.
It's an interesting one, and I think, you know, people with one huge song go either way. I think you can get really grumpy about it. You can be like, fucking hell, I've played this 80 billion times.
Is there a gig where you don't play it?
No, I always play it. Well, unless it's like just new album stuff or whatever, if it's very specific. But
your tour, every night you'll play it.
of course.
Is it always the last track?
No, I kind of slip it in, and I try and sort of like give it at least
Talking around.
Yeah,
So like
less
only a
hype,
few-
And
better.
now.
Yeah.
But
Drum roll.
generally, few fireworks.
Yeah,
Doves are released.
I'm lowered
But we
down
used to
from
do
the
18.
ceiling.
Now it's just
Yeah.
2 doves.
Yeah. Times are hard now.
Paper mache of your ex-girlfriend comes through the curtain.
That still
Wow.
has. That honestly has still blown my mind.
Yeah, I love that.
It's amazing.
But I think, I genuinely feel exceptionally grateful to that song. It's opened the door to the rest of my music, to the rest of the world, and I think as well, it's a big difference if your song is something that you're proud of. I wrote that song. It meant and still means a lot to me. It's not some pop song that somebody else
Yeah,
wrote
that's true.
and put to some horrible beat, and then I have to perform it for the next 30 years. This is a song that I love, and yeah, of course, I've played it thousands of times, so I don't feel it intensely every single time. I still love that song. I'm still very, very proud of it.
That seems like a fitting way to
Really cool
to
place
wrap
to
this up.
Cool.
If you want to download the album now, Passenger, Runaway, and just remind us again of the track that you were talking about before the title. It's
Yes,
track
to
number
be
9.
free. Yeah, to be free.
Seems like a good place to start.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this interview, then comment below with who else you'd like us to talk to. You can listen to our podcast by clicking here or somewhere like that, and make sure you hit subscribe.